Sir Winston Churchill died at his London home soon after 8 this morning. The news of his death was given half an hour later in a statement signed by Lord Moran, Sir Winston's personal doctor. Sir Winston died in peace and without pain. He was 90. Lady Churchill, his 3 surviving children, and other members of the family were present. Sir Winston's father, Lord Randolph Churchill, died exactly 70 years ago today. It was only 2 days ago that Sir Winston's great-grandson was born at Westminster Hospital. Lord Moran was at Sir Winston's bedside at 7 this morning. He left Hyde Park Gate at 9:30. The Queen was informed immediately of Sir Winston's death and has sent a telegram of sympathy to Lady Churchill. The message said, "The news of Sir Winston Churchill's death causes inexpressible grief to me and to my husband. We send our deepest sympathy to you and to your family. The whole world is the poorer by the loss of his many-sided genius, while the survival of this country and the sister nations of the Commonwealth in the face of the greatest danger that has ever threatened them will be a perpetual memorial to his leadership, his vision, and his indomitable courage." Sir Winston Churchill was born in 1874 at Blenheim Palace, the house built by his great ancestor, the first Duke of Marlborough. Sir Winston was a Member of Parliament for 64 years and Prime Minister for 8.5 years, including the 5 great years of his wartime premiership. His last appearance in Parliament was in July last year, when all parties in the House united to pay tribute to him. His life story is in large part the story of the supreme moments of our history in this century.
Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill, aged 6, a lonely ginger-haired boy whose favourite game was playing with soldiers. Of his American-born mother, he later wrote, "I loved her dearly, but at a distance." From prep school to Harrow, where he distinguished himself only by his aggressive spirit and his growing mastery of the English language. And from Harrow to Sandhurst, after 3 attempts at the entrance examination. Then came active service in India and the Sudan, where he took part in the charge of the 21st Lancers at Omdurman. Already the young Churchill had been writing for the newspapers, and in 1899 he joined the team of correspondents covering the South African War. It was an assignment which lasted a fortnight. A month later, he made a daring escape from prison and resumed his dispatches to the Morning Post. In 1900, he began a new career in politics, age 26. In private life, 1908 was the most important date. Of his marriage, he later said, "My ability to persuade my wife to marry me was quite my most brilliant achievement." His bride, Miss Clementine Hosier. 1911, and back in action. As Home Secretary, he directed the siege of Sydney Street in person. A new hat and new ideas stirring beneath it. As First Lord, he modernised the Navy for the war only a year or 2 away. And as the war began, Churchill, aged 40, seemed destined for high office. But war and politics are cruel. His bold scheme for a seaborne landing against the Turks at Gallipoli failed in execution. He resigned and went as an infantry officer to fight in the trenches. Earlier, he had urged the use of the tank, a weapon which finally aided the Allies to victory and began the age of mechanized war. From the trenches, he was recalled as Minister of Munitions. But after the war came defeat at the polls. It was 1924 before he won his way back to Parliament and was appointed Chancellor of the Exchequer. In 1926, the general strike, and Churchill edited the only newspaper published in Britain. But this restless and independent mind was not made to run on party lines. In 1931, he broke with Baldwin. Now his home at Chartwell became headquarters of a campaign to warn the country of the menace of Nazism. The war, when it came, brought him back to office, once again at the Admiralty, and word went round the fleet, "Winston's back." In less than a year, he was Prime Minister in the darkest days Britain had known. As France crumbled, Britain stood alone. In Britain's hour of destiny, Winston Churchill's voice rang out, expressing defiance in superb phrases.
Register. And will still say, this was their finest hour.
Now he appeared in his true greatness. First, he rallied his countrymen, and then the Allies. The final rout. The Allies crossed the Rhine to crush the Nazis and conquer Germany. With victory came rejoicing, and a great wave of affection flooded from the nation to its leader. Two months later, he was out of office. It would have been easy for Mr. Churchill to have retired full of honours, but he felt he had more to give the world than his painting and his memoirs. At a ceremony in Fulton, Missouri, he gave a bleak warning of the Iron Curtain that had descended on Europe. In 1951, he again led the Conservatives at the general election, and this time they were returned, aged 77 and Prime Minister for the second time. In office, he pursued his lifelong theme of the unity of English-speaking peoples. He was proud that his ancestors had fought on both sides in the War of Independence. And to this old theme, he added a new one of a Europe united against communism, with Germany and France linked in partnership. In 1954, a new honour, installed as Knight of the Garter. Mr. Churchill had become Sir Winston, created a knight in the fullness of his years by a new and young queen, a man whose life had spanned the change from empire to commonwealth. The following year came retirement, after a farewell dinner with the Queen at number 10. The recent years are fresh in all our memories, a venerable but still jaunty figure, secure in his place in history, and securer still in the love his nation bore him.
Sir Winston officially retired as a Member of Parliament not long before his 90th birthday on November the 30th. Even after he stepped down as Prime Minister, he was active in public life, and throughout the autumn years, he remained a familiar and much-loved traveller.
Sir Winston Churchill, parliamentary candidate. In 1959, in his 85th year, he fought his last election. He'd retired as Prime Minister just 4 years before, but now he asked his constituents in Woodford to send him back once more to the parliamentary life he loved. Sir Winston spent 64 years of his life in active politics. He wound up his parliamentary career as Father of the House of Commons and the most respected elder statesman of our time. The world honoured him. In Germany, the nation he'd been instrumental in defeating, he was awarded the Charlemagne Prize for his services in the cause of European unity. His old school, Harrow, honoured him too on his regular visits. But after his retirement as Prime Minister, his major political speeches became rarer. One of them was at a Primrose League rally in 1957.
The world around us, ladies and gentlemen, is changing every day. For good or ill, new and disturbing powers are falling into the hands of mankind. They may bring an unsurpassed blessing, or they may bring a senseless and meaningless wholesale destruction. We must hope that man's wisdom will match his widening knowledge. In fostering that growth of wisdom, I'm certain that our party, with its noble roots in the past, has a worthy and important part to play.
In the autumn years of his busy and restless life, he was still not content to settle down in one place for long. He travelled frequently to the Mediterranean to enjoy the sunshine, and he was often a guest aboard Mr. Aristotle Onassis' yacht. One cruise took them down to the Canary Islands. On other holidays, Sir Winston would stay in the south of France. He was particularly fond of Nice. And it was here in 1958 that he and Lady Churchill celebrated their golden wedding. It was from Nice in 1962 that he was flown home to London after he'd slipped and broken a bone. He was 87. The accident kept him in hospital for 2 months. But when he finally left the hospital, all the familiar jauntiness was still there. In the very last years of his life, his outings became more infrequent and his journeys shorter. Reluctantly, he realized that he must soon retire altogether from public life. And in 1963, he wrote to his Woodford constituents to say that he wouldn't stand again for Parliament. But right up to his final retirement with the dissolution of Parliament in 1964, he insisted on going regularly to the House of Commons. It would have been easy, he once said, to have retired at the end of the war, to spend his time writing and painting. His simple reason for staying in public life was, I am a child of the House of Commons.
The last time the world saw Sir Winston was when he celebrated his 90th birthday in November. He appeared at the window of his London home to wave his greetings to the waiting crowd.
6 weeks later, in the same street outside the same house, a very different scene. Sir Winston's doctor, Lord Moran, found an anxious crowd beginning to gather in the rain on his first visit to Hyde Park Gate. Reporters waited outside as Lord Moran emerged after nearly an hour with Sir Winston. As he left, he gave the first of what was to be a long series of bulletins on Sir Winston's condition.
I want to just read you a briefing, if I may. Are you ready? After a cold, Sir Winston has developed secondary weakness, and there has been a cerebral thrombosis.
The Prime Minister, Mr. Wilson, was among the first of the stream of visitors who began to arrive at the Churchill home. He left, grim-faced, and declined to say anything to reporters. Throughout the long hours of waiting, the distinctive bowler-hatted figure of Detective Sergeant Edmund Murray seldom left the pavement outside the front door of number 28. He's been Sir Winston's constant companion for the last 15 years, the special branch bodyguard whose duty was to protect Sir Winston from harm. While the crowds were there, he remained on duty 18 hours a day, courteously meeting callers at the front door. The respect with which he is held was clearly shown. Only a friendly nod of the head has been needed to remind all outside number 28 that his word there was law.
Tributes and messages of sympathy have been arriving all morning at Hyde Park Gate. The Prime Minister, Mr. Harold Wilson, in his message said, "Sir Winston will be mourned all over the world by all who owe so much to him. He is now at peace after a life in which he created history and which will be remembered as long as history is read." Sir Alec Douglas Hume, leader of the opposition, said, "The death of Sir Winston brings to everyone in our country emotions at once of deep sorrow and heartfelt gratitude. For, in a very special sense, each one of us owes it to him that we are alive and free." Lord Avon, formerly Sir Anthony Eden, spoke of Sir Winston as a loyal friend and said, "His stature is too great for us to assess him wholly at this time, but we can feel gratitude and pride." Lord Attlee, Sir Winston's deputy during the war years, said that Sir Winston was a statesman who could not be compared with anyone else. His was an amazing career which appeared several times to have ended in futility, but always he came back again, and eventually he came to times supremely suitable for his abilities. Field Marshal Earl Alexander of Tunis said in a tribute to Sir Winston, "The greatest Englishman of our time has now gone to the rest he has so well earned, and we mourn his death." The Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Ramsay, said, "The long vigil is over, and our hearts go out with sympathy to all Sir Winston's family, and in gratitude to God for giving the world a man so great." The Archbishop of Westminster, Dr. John Heenan, "If Hitler had triumphed, the church in Europe would have been destroyed. All who prize religious freedom, thank God for Churchill and cherish his memory." Sir Winston called the Battle of Britain our finest hour. In many ways, it was also his. In many ways, the greatest memories of him are of that time. To speak appropriately, first of all, we've invited one of the few, Group Captain Douglas Bader.
It was inevitable, but it's almost impossible to believe, because my generation, which was the generation which was grown up in 1940, when the Second World War started, reckoned that Winston Churchill was indestructible. In 1940, in June, when the Nazis, the Germans, had overrun Europe and lay 21 miles away, the other side of the Channel, the British were alone. Now, at that time, this tremendous man, the greatest Englishman there has ever been, Winston Churchill, he took over the affairs of our lives. And in his first speech, he said, "I have nothing to offer you but blood and tears and toil and sweat." And later on, talking to Hitler at a time when every foreign ambassador had left London and told his government that England was finished, he made that tremendous speech when he said, We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight in the hills, we shall fight in the towns. We shall never surrender. Now, Winston Churchill, who was the master of the English tongue, he spoke the English language that it has never been spoken by anyone. He told us, and he brought out all the latent character in the British, the bulldog breed. And there he was, telling us to do what we wanted to do, what we believed we could do, and we just wanted someone like him to lead us. Indeed, Winston Churchill, he looked like the bulldog, the epitome of English courage, of kindness, just like a bulldog, of never let go, tenaciousness. And you saw that great head with its massive jaw, and when he had finished a sentence sometimes he would pause and his face would sort of crumple into repose, and it only needed a couple of lines to change it, and there was the English bulldog. This was the man to my generation than whom there was no other. No other so great, there never will be, there never has been. And as long as the English language is spoken throughout the generations, the fathers will tell the sons in the English public houses, in the hamlets, in the villages. There will always be stories of Winston Churchill. They will always be kind because everybody loved him. In other words, there's possibly never been a man in the whole of our history who was so universally loved by the whole of the British people. He was loved so much by his own fellow countrymen, and he never failed them. Now, I speak as an ordinary person, just one of the common people who lived and fought through the war of 1940, 41, 45, and who very specifically remembers the year 1940 when we were really down rock bottom until Winston Churchill lifted us up with his astonishing, unbelievable powers of oratory. And the great thing about him was that he never lied. He always told us the truth. And if I were to be asked to write his epitaph, the epitaph of this giant Englishman, I would simply write one sentence: he was one of us.
Tributes are already coming in from all over the world. We've just received this one from Mr. Keith Holyoake, the Prime Minister of New Zealand.
This is a sad moment, yet an immensely proud moment, as we pause to pay homage to the memory of a wonderful man. Sir Winston Churchill was an illustrious and greatly loved Englishman, one of the truly great world figures of our day and age. His name will be recorded in history as a man of imperishable words and deeds. At this time, we in New Zealand join with the peoples of Britain and the Commonwealth, and indeed the world, in paying affectionate tribute to Sir Winston's memory. This is a moment not so much for mourning as for deep pride and gratitude that in our time such a man should have risen among us. That in our hour of gravest peril we could look to such a leader. Here was a man who shaped destiny. Churchill the indomitable, the unconquerable warrior. Churchill the spirit of a nation, the symbol of freedom and hope for millions of enslaved peoples in the darkest war years. This, surely, is how history will remember him. Churchill in his finest hour as Britain's defiant, implacable, inspiring leader.
General de Gaulle, in a message of condolence, said, "France is deeply conscious of the loss which England has suffered. For everyone in my country and for myself, Sir Winston Churchill is and will always remain the man who, in leading the admirable British war effort to victory, contributed greatly to saving the French people and the freedom of the world." The West German Chancellor, Dr. Erhard, in a message to Lady Churchill, said, Sir Winston's death has filled the federal government and me with great sorrow. We sincerely share your grief on the death of this great man and statesman. President Tito sent this message. I deeply believe that the countries of the anti-fascist coalition will remember always with gratitude his fighting spirit, restless work, and great contribution to the victory of the Allies in World War II. American television and radio stations broke into their programs with the news. Sandy Gall reports from New York on America's reaction to Sir Winston's death.
It was with a real sense of personal loss that Americans heard this morning of Sir Winston Churchill's death. He was undoubtedly the only non-American in the world who could inspire this feeling of being one of them. For days now in New York, it was enough to be overheard speaking with an English accent for complete strangers to come up and comment on the latest news about his illness. And of course, his final battle against death rekindled all the tremendous admiration Americans felt for his fighting qualities, recalling inevitably his most magnificent moments during the war. To Americans, Sir Winston was and is quite simply the greatest man of the century. Nor do they forget that he was half American by birth and an honorary American citizen by general acclamation. It was expected here that President Johnson would fly to London for Sir Winston's funeral, but now that the President is in hospital with a severe cold, it seems unlikely that he will attend.
Canadian Prime Minister Mr. Lester Pearson said that all Canadians are grief-stricken. He said that Sir Winston's courage, the majesty of his words, and the inspiration of his leadership and his life will endure for all time. The Indian Prime Minister Mr. Shastri said that the lasting tribute that could be paid would be to continue to work for the principles of peace and democracy for which Sir Winston fought all his life. One of the few surviving troops who fought with the young Winston at the Battle of Omdurman in 1898, Chief Suleiman Ahmed of Tanzania, said on learning of Sir Winston's death, "He was a brave warrior. I am proud to have fought with him." The chief is 93. All three of the great Allied wartime leaders died from strokes. Franklin Roosevelt was still president when he died at Warm Springs in Georgia on April 12, 1945. Joseph Stalin lay in a coma for 4 days after a stroke before dying on March 5, 1955. And now, Sir Winston. Sir Winston will be buried on Saturday at Leyden Churchyard, just outside the walls of Blenheim Palace, his birthplace, after a state funeral in St. Paul's Cathedral. He'll lie in state for 3 days from next Wednesday in Westminster Hall. An appeal is being organised for a memorial to Sir Winston. Field Marshal Lord Alexander will be in charge, and it's being organised on an international basis. The Prime Minister said this morning that Sir Winston always regarded Churchill College, Cambridge, as his national memorial. Mr. Wilson added, "The new appeal will enable the public to show their respect for his memory." We'll be bringing you further news after lunch and throughout the day. And at 8 o'clock tonight, independent television will present a tribute from the Prime Minister and other party leaders, with a special film portrait of Sir Winston Churchill's life.